This is the London Fintech Podcast, bringing you practical insights and approaches, stories and inspiration from the innovators who are building the new world of financial services. This podcast is brought to you by NextWave, strategy specialists and solutions for financial institutions. Welcome to London Fintech Podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by a super innovative fintech that's driving the democratization of investing through providing the infrastructure that powers many other fintechs and investment managers. There's so much going on in the investment side of the sector, and in the hyper-connected and high-speed world that we live in, the ability to be able to plug new investment functionality into bank and investment businesses via an API is a really compelling proposition, both for access to investment products and tools and for speed to market. My guest today is Symmie Swil, the UK General Manager for Upvest. Upvest are on a mission to support millions to take control of their financial future and build their wealth, something we will hear more about today. Welcome, Symmie. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Tony. It's a pleasure to join you.
So tell us a bit about you. You're no stranger to the fintech sector, and it'd be great to get a bit on your background and how you came to take the role with Upvest, which I think was earlier this year.
That's absolutely right. So I've spent almost 2 decades in banking and fintech. I joined Upvest at the beginning of this year to build out their UK business. They are a European investment infrastructure provider, which doesn't quite roll off the tongue, but I promise is a lot more fun than it sounds. Our mission is to make investing as easy as spending money. So money is something that, we don't even think about. We tap with our phone. We have subscriptions we forget about. And really, we want investing to feel as seamless and as embedded in the everyday experience, as understandable and as transparent as neobanks have made banking and payments. In terms of my journey, I guess I was lucky enough. I now realize this is quite rare to grow up in a family where investing was all around me. My dad was a life insurance actuary, then moved into superannuation, which is the pension system in Australia. So, from a super young age, it was always really important to be talking about finances and investing. I think I remember being 12 and, getting the big newspaper out and sort of looking at the back pages to see the prices of stocks. And I think he was trying to teach me about PE ratios before I even knew what fractions were at school. So I think I was pretty destined to end up in financial services. I started off in investment banking and, had an amazing learning curve there in terms of working with CEOs and CFOs of, large businesses, talking about their strategy, their finance, how they were positioning with investors, valuations. But I knew I really wanted to be actually building a business, not just advising on it. So I ended up moving to London. As you may tell from my accent, I'm Australian originally. I was living in Shoreditch at the time and I had everything in fintech around me. It was super exciting. I'd signed up for Revolut as an early customer. I was on the Monzo waitlist when it was still Mondo, but I was going into work each day and sending faxes to the UK listing authority and writing 100-page prospectuses that, weren't really designed for any consumer to ever actually read or make a decision off the back of. So to cut a very long story short, ended up moving into strategy to try and, bring fintech into the bank, launch new products, but kept hitting brick walls in terms of ops, tech, data. So I realized I had to move more into that space in order to drive any form of change. Cutting another long story short, essentially ended up restructuring our KYC onboarding teams in order to be launching our first corporate digital product and digital onboarding journey, which then led me to building the business banking department for Starling Bank. So when I joined, we had 150,000 customers. When I left, we had 450,000 customers. So that was everything from ops, strategy, policy, product design, and, really learning what it felt like to work in a super fast moving fintech and super focused on the customer experience. How do we talk to them? How do we connect every element of their journey? As you mentioned, I joined Upvest earlier this year, and it's a Berlin-based, and it's really about building the team and the product locally here.
I mean, that's a great overview. So you've had economics and finance sort of in your blood from early on, and I love the Starling story, tripling the business banking customer base in a short period. It's a great grounding for what you're doing, and you're not the first to lead a large and progressive European fintech into the UK market. I've spoken on this show to IBAN First, Robinhood, not a European scale up, but a major player with a focus on London HQ and build out this year, and many others. And it's quite an immersive opportunity to be given, I'm sure, because there's something that's moving at great speed and got great opportunity. Here's the location strategy, and let's go. How fast and how far can you take it? So I'm curious, what do you do when you're not at work? Because I imagine the day job probably pulls on both ends of the calendar.
It absolutely does. Outside of work, I actually am also a non-executive director of a housing association, which I guess is more of a charity not-profit, which is a good contrast to the day-to-day. I do some angel investing, and I'm part of a sort of female founder community to support female founders. And then I think more for fun, family, friends. I live near the canals, so I'll try to walk along them every weekend. I like to go to the theatre, like to travel. I've been to about 70 countries so far. So I'm happy to,
70,
yeah. So happy
really
happy to,
well traveled. Yeah.
so yeah.
I love that, living by the canal. So for those who do live in London, I'm fortunate we're in zone 2. We're south of the river, so there's no canal south of the river, but it's sort of hidden London. If you get up on Regent's Canal and you go up by London Zoo, and there's floating restaurants and hidden markets and bars, and a surprising amount of lime bikes in the canal, actually.
Well, it's actually quite dangerous now because there's a surprising number of lime bugs along the canal as well.
Yeah, so you have to watch out for those. Bit of a hazard. Before we jump right into today's episode, a quick thank you to our sponsor, NextWave. NextWave is an award-winning consultancy that is helping many of the world's leading banks, investment managers, and insurers deliver on their growth, efficiency, risk, and control goals and transform their businesses. With a senior team who have come from MD-level positions in major firms like HSBC, Barclays, and UBS, NextWave has both the deep industry expertise and the hands-on capabilities in AI, data, and automation to drive real results. More business outcomes and less PowerPoint from the consulting experience, as their clients like to say. NextWave has moved 2-week manual processes to 5-minute agentic automations, rescued global banking regulatory control programs, and digitized deal platforms, sustainability, and regulatory reporting systems. And they do much of this with hands-on engineering capabilities on leading technologies, which include ServiceNow, Alteryx, Quantexa, and Camunda. So if a modern and specialist alternative to the big brand consulting model sounds appealing, one which covers the full life cycle of strategy specialists and solutions, but with small practitioner teams, rapid delivery, and a better price point, then perhaps you should talk to NextWave. Visit nxwave.com to find out more and get in touch. That's nxwave.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. Okay, back to Upvest. So foundations in Berlin, I believe. Can you tell us a bit about the Upvest story, where it came from, and the trajectory since inception?
Sure. So Upvest was founded in Berlin, you're right, in 2017. Probably the best way to think about it is we are bringing a D2C experience to investment infrastructure, which has been traditionally quite removed and abstract from the everyday customer experience. So our first clients were Revolut, Raisin, N20 Spunk. In the UK, we're launching with Webull, which is a global broker. We've just been chosen by DKB, which is one of the largest digital banks in Europe, which has 35 billion euros of assets that will be migrating across to Upvest. And for us, it is about enabling that end user customer experience. What does investment infrastructure mean? The way I think about it is when you log on to your investing app or website, everything at the front will be your bank or your broker. The minute you press the buy or the trade or the deal button, we do everything else after that. So we execute your trade for Rolls-Royce or S&P 500 ETF. We then arrange for settlement, so the transfer of cash and securities. We then custody that. So we make sure that you receive dividends on time, you receive the reporting, valuations, any tax that's required. We manage all of that. So we take away all of the complexity for banks, brokers, and fintechs and enable them to provide a really seamless and engaging experience for their customers. So our product is really one of 4 things. So it's the tech, those APIs, it's our licenses. So we're fully licensed in Germany and the UK. And for our fintech clients, we sometimes let them use our licenses in order to provide an embedded investing experience. We have middle and back office operations, so our clients outsource all of that complexity and operational work to us. And then we provide the connectivity to the rest of the investment ecosystem. So that's what makes investment infrastructure so hard, is actually having to connect to all of the different exchanges, data, proxy voting, tax reporting, etc. We take all of that complexity away.
Yeah, and there's a huge amount that needs to be put in place if you're going to launch a investment product to the market, and you're essentially doing that for your clients. So I think of it like perhaps Shopify or Stripe plugging into the online retail experience. So we talk a lot about payments on this show as well, and perhaps it's like that, but for investing. Is that fair?
I think that's very fair. I describe us as the Stripe for investing. So
There you go.
yeah, so you've basically stolen my tagline. We make it really easy for developers to offer that experience. We're very focused on what does this mean for the end customer, but also for our clients. So yeah, exactly. Just like Stripe.
And just sort of from a news scan, there's announcement almost every month from Upvest in terms of a new client or a new partnership. And you mentioned a few names. I mean, I don't know when you did the Revolut deal, but Revolut's obviously a big deal these days and just opened in London with it create 1,000 jobs and big HQ in Canary Wharf. Very exciting. And so these are big tie-ups and big clients that you're onboarding. How's the growth curve been? Has this been this way since the beginning?
It's definitely grown very quickly, very recently. I think we originally started in crypto and then pivoted to realizing that actually before you start fixing the blockchain, there's so much to fix in traditional investing. We really pride ourselves on our speed, which is probably why you're seeing those announcements so quickly. When we did sign the Revolut deal, which is a couple of years now, we launched with them within 3 months in the EU, which is probably how long it takes most other providers to agree a contract. So we see that as really core to our heritage, where we started with direct to consumer or these fintechs. Most investment infrastructure providers really start probably on the wealth management side. So it's not about real time pricing or an app or sort of having live daily feedback from your consumers. So that is the environment essentially we're born into, which is you've got to move fast, you've got to ship quickly, you've got to be incredibly responsive to customer feedback. So I see that as really part of what makes us so special and makes us a lot easier and faster to deal with, which is that D2C heritage for something that's traditionally been, quite far away from the end consumer.
Yeah. And talking about speed of growth, so the press release for when you started says that you're going to have 3 UK clients by Christmas and a team of 50 people. So I'm wondering how that's going.
No, it's close on the number of people, and we are imminently launching a few clients. So I'm excited. I'm excited to announce those.
Oh, brilliant. Well, look, you don't have to front run that in this conversation, but it's good to have a target. And if you can announce that you're hitting the metrics, then that's going to be great. I'm sure it's going to be an interesting journey. Let's talk about embedded finance a bit more then. So just sort of unpack, what does Upvest provide, I guess, in access? You talked a bit about front to back, you're providing that full investment service, but asset class wise and products. So if you're an aspiring or an existing investment manager or bank and you want to broaden your product range and your offering, what does Upvest bring?
So in terms of asset classes, we provide UK, European, and US stocks and ETFs. We provide mutual funds, money market funds. We're launching bonds and securitized derivatives in Europe. But we're really client led. So actually with each client, we will work with them to figure out what assets they need, what the scope of those are, and then we will onboard those assets as and when is required. So I think we're targeting 10,000 ISINs by the end of this year. So, and probably had about a fraction of that end of last year. And that's been very much, growing with the needs of our clients.
And you mentioned crypto perhaps earlier on. Is that something that comes into the product set at some point, or are you leaving that to others for now? Because there's lots of people in that space.
It's something we're always debating. At the moment, we're leaving it to others. We see a huge opportunity with stocks and ETFs, and the way we're doing that is incredibly differentiated, and we're really doubling down on that.
Yeah. Well, perhaps talk about that differentiation. I think you do some quite complicated things like fractional shares as well. But what's the Upvest sort of secret sauce?
We have a few secret sources. I think, like you said, the product itself. So we're designed particularly for retail customers, getting people started on their investment journey. So fractions are an important part of that. For those that aren't aware of what a fraction is, when you invest, you can sort of say, I want to buy one share or one ETF, or you can say, I want to invest £10. Now, if an ETF costs £100 and you're working with a provider that doesn't offer fractions, that trade just won't go through. We wouldn't allow you to buy, a tenth of that ETF and continue to receive the gains from that. And then maybe in the next month, buy another £10. That's super important when it comes down to getting people started because we have the capability to get you started from £1. A lot of our clients have no trading fees. You can, there's no friction to really get started early or to set up recurring investments, so £10 a month. If you don't have fractions, those orders just won't go through, or you'll be restricted to buying only shares or ETFs that have a price that's below the amount you want to invest. And you probably can't set up those recurring investment plans, which is super critical to building wealth over time. And part of our mission, which is, have investing as part of your daily life. So set and forget a subscription essentially to building your wealth. So we see fractions as really important, but also reducing the cost of trading so that our clients can offer trade-free, commission-free, or otherwise quite low-cost investment offerings in order to make investing as accessible as possible. So secret sauce is really the fractional trading, the overall ease of our APIs, the speed, the real-time trading, so that we can make it seamless and frictionless, but how we've invested in our back office operations so that the overall cost is low enough that our clients can make it easy and accessible for their client bases, for their
Yeah.
customer bases.
And why do you think it is that embedded investing API offerings are gaining traction? You talked about very rapid recent growth. This current state of market. I mean, there's obviously a lot here. It's an ability to provide front to back, and it's also the ability to embed in the user experience. But big banks have got big resources, so maybe they could build for themselves. But why the embedded investing model at this stage of the market?
We actually have 3 models. So we do embedded investing where, a trusted brand can use our license. We think that that's really important for particularly a new generation of investors to get started investing in an environment that they're comfortable with. So bring investing to where they're already managing their money, where they already trust or are receiving, financial guidance or support. And we see that sort of is where the direction is heading generally. So if you think about what's happened with neobanks, there's a proliferation of brands. Each of them are talking to a particular customer base in the way that they want to be spoken to, and investing should be the same. So embedded investing really is about enabling those types of clients or brands to put investing at the heart of where the customer is already trusting and spending and thinking about their money. In terms of banks, we have a couple of other models. So where we are providing the brokerage and custody, and we're providing the back office operations, and we're doing everything else, but they're not using our licenses because they have them already. We are reducing their costs. We're helping them move as quickly and as seamlessly as they're seeing the fintechs move, but they obviously just don't need to use Upvest from a licensing perspective. We actually see that as like a big opportunity because the banks have all the clients, they have all the customers, they are, just losing ground really. So we really see that they're going to have to innovate quite quickly in order to be able to compete with all of the neo brokers that are now launching and are doing really well.
So it's about the pace of innovation and being able to modernize and provide front to back capabilities at the speed that the market's looking.
Well, if you think about it, a lot of the existing investment infrastructure providers, they might do quarterly releases. We're releasing changes daily. You're competing with Monzo, which I think does hundreds of releases daily. So you just can't stand still and you can't rely on, slower trading platforms. A lot of them don't offer fractions, or they might only offer funds or have funds and ETFs and stocks on completely different systems. So you just can't provide a digital first app based offering. And you just can't compete. So we really think that that's going to be increasingly important, the same way that eventually Lloyds, Barclays, NatWest all started building apps that copied Monzo, Starling, Revolut. So
Yeah.
we see that as the future.
And I said in my intro, and I believe this is accurate, Upvest on a mission to support millions take control of their financial future. So how are financial services providers using Upvest and other digital tools to open up access to investment? And sort of how do you see the Upvest proposition, really powering that mission to democratize access?
So, like I said, our mission was to make investing as easy as spending money. And we think we've succeeded when we have 100 million users on our platform. We're not there yet, don't
Okay.
worry, but that's sort of the scale we're aiming for. We see that in multiple ways. That is either working with existing providers that have, hundreds of thousands or millions, but helping them reduce the costs and make it easy for them to support a wider range of customers or enable them to do more. And then it's also about enabling new propositions. So working with Revolut, for example, to offer investing, or working with other new brands to come into the market and provide something that is transformative. The UK is particularly interesting in that, the majority of assets, I think there's about £2 trillion of retail investment assets. The majority of that is under what we call advised offerings. So it's looked after by advisors or wealth managers. But 90% of people by number don't have access to advice. So really we're saying, how do we provide the support for that other 90% to start investing or, start investing more? And, that is the direction of travel from the regulator. I think this is a, core area of focus from the FCA in particular around targeted support. How do you give people something short of advice, help them build their confidence they can get started, whether it's, a £10 monthly investment in an ETF or, some, cotton wool surrounding, here's how to get started on investing in the apps themselves.
So given you have a 100 million user target, where are you at on that currently?
It depends how you look at it. We think we have 50 million potential users based on the customers that clients we support already, but obviously a smaller number of that actively using the app.
Yeah.
We do have 2 million orders a week, so we think we are touching millions on a regular basis.
To your point about giving users access to the tools, that's a really interesting point because and you said 90% of the user base don't have access to advice. But if you don't have access to advice, and then you get given access to go and buy potentially complex investment products, there's an obvious question there is, are people going to make the right decisions? Have you got the guide rails in place? And there's this whole question of financial literacy, which varies very much across the UK population and has been often quoted by guests on this show actually as one of their key focus areas and something that the government and the regulators and the industry bodies need to focus on. So what's your take on financial literacy across your user base, and how's Upvest ensuring that I guess your tools are getting into the right hands and being used in the right way?
It's a good question. The way we see it is really about picking our partners well, and each of them will have a different way of thinking about their client base. So we have clients that are sophisticated brokers. They will obviously do the correct and appropriate assessments of suitability of products. And on the other hand, we've got what we call wealth cases. So clients that are offering 5 ETFs or, 5 mutual funds carefully curated with lots of financial education. So for us, it's really about we've got the asset classes, we've got the tools, and then it's around enabling clients that are spending their time caring about the well-being of their customer base. In terms of financial literacy, I think there's a lot that still needs to be done, but also I think there's a lot of move in the right direction. And again, I think there is a huge push from the regulator in terms of providing support in a more accessible way. And pension reform and auto enrollment is having a huge effect in terms of people starting to realize that they're investors, whether they realize it or not, and they should start thinking about their investments because there's 20 million of us that have our pensions invested in the stock market. And, we should start caring about those investments and start thinking about what else we can do with our money in order to care for our retirement.
I love that point about picking your partners carefully. So important. I just want to come back to something you touched on, which was obviously central to your role, which is the UK opportunity and expanding Upvest in the UK market. How do you see the UK environment for scaling fintechs like yours, and sort of how supportive is the environment for you on your mission with Upvest?
It might not be fashionable to say this at the moment, but I think London and the UK is one of the best places to still build a fintech. London in particular, it's rare for being a tech center, a financial center, and a center of regulation and policy. And it's a really magical mix. And we feel like we're at the center of that at the moment in terms of the clients we can work with. So the volume and number of exciting fintechs, the quality of the banks and the brokers that are here that we can work with, the incredible tech talent, and of course, the regulatory innovation and sort of policy support for what we're working on. So I think it's an incredibly exciting opportunity for us in the UK.
And is that what sat behind the decision to to invest in expanding in the UK. I think I'm right in saying Upvest is, for want of a better label, big in Germany and probably in a number of other places. It's a big move to say we're going to prioritize the UK next.
So there are a number of drivers for why we came to the UK. The fundamentals, as we've discussed, are huge. It's the biggest retail investment market in Europe. It's growing. There are, 12 million people that are underinvested for their pension and, inevitably need to start investing for their pension. We also have an incredible prospective client base, as I described. So the largest fintech market in Europe, which will inevitably start creating some FOMO for the largest banking community in Europe. And then, like I said, incredible talent, supportive regulatory environment. But over and above all of that, we actually had clients that were asking for us to come here. So
Oh, very
the
good.
pan-European UK opportunity, I think, is, what eventually pushed us to come here.
Yeah, I think it would have been a fairly obvious move anyway. But if you've got clients already asking you, I mean, that's sort of, I guess, the happy path for any scale fintech is if you've already got demand and you've proven the market fit for a location. So,
Absolutely. I think we're
and
quite
you
lucky.
talked about some of the advantages of London. Perhaps what do you find the hardest about hitting the plan and scaling out here, if there is anything that's giving you headwinds at this stage?
I think I've actually been quite lucky. So I think there's the normal challenges of starting a new business, so hiring and building a brand. But the team have been incredibly thoughtful. We did a lot of thinking up front as to what are the things that can go wrong about the new market element of that. So how do you stay aligned? How do you create a cohesive culture? How do you make sure people feel connected and you can leverage the resources of the group? And a lot of that upfront thinking means that, I think a lot of those challenges that might have happened, we've largely avoided. There are 250 people at Upvest. I would say at any given month, probably about 50% of them are working on something UK related. So it really feels like we're part of, the wider team and, it's really one team. So, it's been pretty special so far.
So your mission is everyone else's mission as well.
Pretty much. But that's the way it should be. This is a huge strategic initiative for us, and it's not about the UK and then the rest of Europe. It is a single company mission, and, we're working together to do it.
Yeah. How have you found the talent market? I'm curious because I was talking to Finch Capital about State of European FinTech. It's sort of one episode earlier, I think, than perhaps this one when we publish. And they introduced the concept of peak engineering, which is there's a lot of big tech firms that are now offboarding engineers because of the advent of AI. And there's quite a lot of talent on the market. There's also, and it's been written about a lot, there's a lot of graduate resource looking for work. So it feels to me as if perhaps the supply side, perhaps you've got a lot to choose from, but also I'm conscious you'll be searching for very particular skills and you want to build a top tier team. And I'm just curious how you're finding the talent market and how do you choose? Because I imagine you get a lot of applications for something like this.
It is exciting to have so many people want to work at Upvest. I think we have an incredible brand from a cultural perspective, and I think that comes across in how we communicate and how we work with people. So we definitely get a lot of applications. It ranges. There are some roles that could be quite generalist, but the starting roles have really been needing someone with quite a particular expertise, and that's always quite hard to find. I've been lucky. I've got an absolutely incredible team. So far I've been very excited by everyone we've found in the UK. And the broader team are now starting to hire UK team members as well, use us as a talent hub for the wider business as well.
So you touched on team and you touched on brand, but how would you describe the Upvest culture then for anyone aspiring to come and work with Upvest? What's the culture feel like?
I would say it's very authentic and very fun. I don't think I've worked anywhere where it really feels like people bring their whole self to work. We have values like any company does, and I don't think I've ever worked anywhere where people genuinely quote them in a non-cringy way. The value I think is most unusual is something called basically start with why. So tell the story. So, whatever you're doing, think about the wider context, make sure that everyone understands why you're doing something. And I think that tells a lot about Upvest, which is, it's very purpose driven. I think everyone always understands why they're doing something and they're able to then operate and solve problems creatively because they have that broader guardrails rather than being told specifically what to do. So I think that's, it's it's Berlin based, so it's also quite fun, quite natural. I think our strategy has multiple mentions of fun, so I think that's pretty differentiated as well.
So I'm getting quite cool, but very purpose driven. And I love the comments about the culture. So if you've already got, however many applications you're getting, you'll probably get even more after this. But that sounds like a great place to work.
I think
So, and tell me a bit about your experience in fintech leadership. So, I have spoken to quite a number of female founders on this show, but, female founders do remain a minority in the sector overall. And there are some absolute powerhouses out there. I spoke to Mia Drennan from Glass, who had a fantastic story. I think she knocked on 200 doors before she got her first client. Everyone's had their own trajectory, but how do you find it as a female leader in the sector?
I think I've always been one of the only women in a room. I started off in investment banking. So, for me, it's exciting to start working with more women. Fintech has actually got more females in it than I think banking did. I'm conscious that sometimes it means it's harder, but also I think it comes with it a desire that you then need to push yourself harder and be the best. So, I try not to think of it as something that makes anything more difficult. It's just something different. Incredible thing I think is actually the majority of the UK team now is female, and the majority of our clients at the moment, their product leaders are all female. So on a day-to-day basis, I don't particularly feel that. I was at a conference this morning though, where I think I was one of the only women in the room out of about 100 people, and I was the only one wearing pink. So I sometimes am reminded it's slightly it is a slightly different world outside. I try to focus on what are the strengths that I can bring, or how do you highlight the strengths of other women that you're working with, rather than seeing it as anything particularly challenging or a barrier.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's hard to comment, but take everything on its merits, focus on the positives. But there is quite a strong sort of female entrepreneur network, I think, in London and in all the major financial centres. And I love that everyone's sort of looking out for each other and pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I also think that's how London Fintech works. I think it's an incredibly supportive ecosystem generally, whether it's for women or just working in fintech. I'm always delighted and surprised by the number of people that are happy to help you, offer connections, introduce you, be prepared to have a chat. I think that sometimes being part of a smaller network can be just as helpful. Though, whereas, when I was first starting out, I felt quite excluded. I think that's probably the biggest difference, was that network did feel quite male dominated, but now I don't feel that as much. I think everyone is really helpful and prepared to support each other.
Yeah. So looking a bit more forward, we talked about embedded finance, embedded investment, and the rapid growth that Upvest has recently enjoyed. There's so much going on across the sector. So cryptos and DeFi is one thing. We haven't actually got to half an hour into a conversation without mentioning AI. So curious where you see that playing into what you're doing directly, but also broader predictions for the investment sector. What should we look forward to seeing perhaps in the next year?
I'm sure you can get your AI agents to put some AI mentions in the rest of the chat previous to this.
Yes.
I think AI is going to absolutely transform the investment space, probably in a couple of ways. When we talk about closing that advice gap, where you're relying on advisors to sit down on a one-on-one basis, that is the reason why there's often a £250,000 or £300,000 minimum assets level in order to get advice. When you can speak to an AI advisor, if it's properly trained and, regulated, that can really enable more people to feel secure about their finances. And that can make the big gap between making people feel they can start investing and how they start investing. So I'm really excited to see what happens there. And then obviously AI can make existing providers a lot more efficient. So whether that's enabling advisors to see a lot more clients, or to support the back office operations of infrastructure providers or banks or brokers, that ultimately reduces the cost of providing investment services to the end customer. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for end customer, for retail investors to access investing more simply, feel more confident about it, and do it at a lower cost. And then I think the last point is the ability to access data and provide, more high quality guidance or insights into, where people should be investing, or perhaps even about their behavioral insights. When the markets did this, you did that. So, maybe this is something you should be thinking about next time you invest, or maybe you're not as comfortable with your risk levels as you think you should be doing. And, being able to use data in a much smarter way to give people confidence and make better decisions.
Is Upvest layering AI? Are you building AI into your product and service offering?
We're obviously embedding AI in how we work, I think, like everybody else. In terms of the product itself, we're really seeing how we can find clients using AI in clever ways, whether that's providing AI advice or AI enabled data insights, and seeing how our API can help them provide a better experience. So, our APIs obviously provide data seamlessly. It's a lot faster. It's all in one place. So we're already seeing clients being able to provide better data to their customers, but I can only see the proliferation of that and, exponential improvements going forward.
Yeah, I think the smart use of Gen AI and agentic AI in the end-to-end workflows is really where the sectors are at, and you need the right guardrails for all of that. And we talked a lot. I actually had a conversation with SS&C recently on the show. We were talking about exactly that in the investment operations that they do at scale across the sector. And I think there are lots of opportunities, but it's cautious sort of incremental progress, because especially if you're getting into the advice space, you need to make sure your AI is giving consistent, accurate advice that you can audit and trace back. And if your sort of agents go rogue, the risks there are more than significant.
Exactly. The interesting thing is that people are using ChatGPT for AI advice anyway, and so the longer it takes for us to get regulated, safe models, people are sort of using less validated models already, and so it really means we have to catch up quite quickly and from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah, and also then be able to integrate those capabilities into the products and services that institutions are taking to market. The stat that I saw recently was that the model capabilities are doubling every 4 months. But I guess for someone like Upvest, you're going to be pretty agile at adopting what's available into your stack and into your service. For a big institution, that's really quite hard, because they're global, federated, massive teams, lots of legacy tech and sort of technical debt and organizational debt, which I guess comes back to the top of the conversation, is why they're embedding services from firms like Upvest.
Exactly. I think we talk about giving our clients an unfair advantage. So how do we enable them to launch faster, launch better products, create a differentiated customer experience? And we think about that from really tiny things, like how do you make the idea of like the cash transfer as seamless as possible? In a traditional provider, you send the money in, it disappears for 3 days. By that point, you forgot you wanted to invest. So we are thinking about that in multiple different ways to help our clients, and AI will just be something on top of that as well.
I absolutely love that bumper sticker, by the way, giving your clients an unfair advantage. Whoever's in the PR or marketing department who came up with that one, that,
I think that's our CEO, so it's he's justified his position then.
there you go, right there. So what's coming next from Upvest, if you
So
can
in
say?
the UK, we're obviously going to be launching new clients. We are launching and building out our UK product sets. More globally, we are adding assets. As I've mentioned, we're adding more clients, and we are constantly iterating to see how we can continue to offer an even more unfair advantage to our clients.
So scale, scale, scale. Watch this space.
Pretty
And
much.
just before we wrap up, I always ask guests what they're reading, perhaps what they're listening to. You were kind enough to say you'd actually listened to a few of these LFP episodes ahead of this conversation, but I'm curious what's on your reading or listening list.
So I listen to a lot of podcasts. Obviously, yours is the favorite. Aside from that,
Obviously.
obviously, I really love the Acquired podcast, which is long form stories about tech businesses or even sometimes not such tech businesses and what made them successful. I like, Hidden Brain, Cautionary Tales, anything which is sort of fintech, business, psychology. And I think my reading list is pretty similar. So I take a lot of recommendations. I just started reading Crossing the Chasm, which was a recommendation of another European general manager, which is all about tech adoption and sort of what makes, I guess, large companies decide to adopt new technology. So that felt relatively relevant at the moment.
Crossing the Chasm. We'll list that one in the show notes. And yeah, Acquired. I mean, so for anyone who's a podcaster or an aspiring podcaster, there's a sort of a bar that you like to get to, and Acquired's right up there with a few other shows. And those, for anyone who hasn't listened, I think they're every couple of months. They take so much research because the conversations are sometimes 4 hours or 5 hours long, but they're completely modern history lessons. They're researched to such level of detail, and it's just very, very engaging. So I love that. In fact, they don't release often enough because I often listen to those on the commute, and I come in on a bike, speakers on the helmet, so I can. That's my commute listen. And whenever a quad drop a new episode, I was like, that's me for the week. I can do that.
So if whenever you're bored and you've got a spare 6 hours, you can listen to the one about Berkshire Hathaway. So yeah,
There you go,
it's great.
long haul, or Maze, or and the rest. They've done some great company profiles. Okay, thank you. Well, look, I really enjoyed the conversation, and if anyone wants to, I hesitate to suggest anyone who wants to apply for a job because I think it'll be inundated. But anyone wants to find out more about you or about Upvest?
So our website is upvest.co, and you can find me on LinkedIn. My name's a bit strange, but I'm assuming it's in the show notes, so you should be able to find me from there.
Yeah, as we discussed at the start, it's Simei, but quite an unusual spelling, I think. So
Yeah,
easy to find and hard to
exactly.
forget. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Bye.